You know that feeling, right? You're heading into a tough conversation and you just wish you had the perfect set of words, like a magic key to make sure it all goes smoothly. Well, for decades, we've been told that key actually exists, a tool that's supposed to let us navigate conflict without blowing everything up. So let's take a hard look at that tool.
And here it is, the I statement. Therapists, managers, communication gurus, they've all praised this thing as the absolute gold standard. The whole idea is pretty simple. You start with I feel to talk about your emotions, and that way you're not pointing fingers, you're not putting the other person on the defensive. It's sold as the secret to constructive dialogue.
But what if it doesn't work? What if this famous technique, this thing we've all been taught, actually makes things worse? What if, instead of building a bridge, it's just building a different kind of wall? One that's maybe a little more polite sounding? That's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, Section 1, the I statement myth. Let's peel back the layers on why the supposedly foolproof tool so often falls flat on its face. So here's how it's supposed to work in theory. You've got the you statement, right? You always cut me off. That's basically a declaration of war. It's an accusation that immediately makes people put their guards up. Then you have the I statement as the peaceful alternative. By focusing on your feelings, you're not blaming, you're just sharing. It's designed to be non-threatening, to invite the other person in. On paper, it looks perfect.
But in reality, it can land completely differently. As one Reddit user so beautifully put it, it can just sound like this. Pointless, self-righteous, micromanaging nonsense. You know? It can feel less like you're being vulnerable and more like you're delivering a passive-aggressive jab wrapped up in some kind of therapy speak.
And listen, this isn't just a feeling people have. The data actually backs it up. One study looked at young couples and found that when one person used I language to criticize the other, it almost never softened the message. The person listening still heard, "You're doing something wrong," and they still got defensive. The point is, the magic words just aren't magic.
So if changing our words isn't the real answer, what is? Well, that brings us to Section 2, Judgment versus Curiosity. This is where we find out the real work isn't about the script, it's about the mindset. It's a total shift in how we approach the situation.
You've probably heard this quote from the show Ted Lasso, and it absolutely nails it. Be curious, not judgmental. This cuts right to the chase. The goal isn't to find a fancier, less blamey way to deliver our judgment. The goal is to let go of the judgment entirely and choose curiosity instead. And that one little shift changes everything. Think about it. A judgmental mindset immediately asks, what is wrong with this person? It's a dead end. All it leads to is blame, and it just builds a wall between the two of you. But a curious mindset asks a totally different question. I wonder what their story is. And that question, that opens the door to actually understanding what's going on.
Now, our brains are kind of wired for this judgmental default. It's a cognitive bias called the fundamental attribution error. It's basically our brain's shortcut to assume that what people do is who they are. We see someone miss a deadline and think, they're lazy, instead of wondering, maybe something's going on at home. And what's wild is that this bias gets way stronger when we're stressed.
Okay, so if our brains are programmed to jump to judgment, especially under pressure, how in the world do we fight that? How do we make that shift from just reacting to being genuinely curious? That leads us to Section 3, the power of the pause. And the answer is so simple. It's simply the pause. That tiny moment of intentional silence before you speak, before you hit send on that email. It's the space between the trigger and your reaction. It sounds almost too easy, but trust me, in the heat of a difficult moment, learning to pause is one of the most powerful skills you can ever build.
So what's actually going on in your brain when you do this? When you react instantly, your brain gets flooded with stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and your focus narrows to just the threat in front of you. But when you take that pause, even for a second, those hormones start to fade. It gives other chemicals, like oxytocin, the bonding hormone, a chance to kick in. This literally changes your brain chemistry, letting you see the bigger picture and actually connect with the person you're talking to.
As Dr. Chris Johnson puts it, pausing is a direct reflection of your ability to manage your own state. It's not about being passive, it's about being in control of yourself, and it will absolutely transform your leadership and your relationships.
Okay, so you've done it. You paused, you took a breath, and stopped that knee-jerk reaction. So now what? That brings us to Section 4, the art of inquiry. This is where we turn that internal pause into an external action.
It all starts with active listening, and I don't just mean nodding along while you wait for your turn to talk.
Real active listening is about creating what's called psychological safety. It's about making a space where people feel so heard and so safe that they're willing to share their real ideas, their concerns, without being afraid they'll be shot down. That is where trust and real innovation come from.
Now, it's really important to get this. Not all curiosity is the same. There's what you might call probing curiosity, where you're listening with a goal. You're trying to fix it, to solve it. It might be well-intentioned, but it can actually make the other person clam up. But then there's empathic curiosity. That's when you listen for one reason and one reason only, to understand. That's what creates the space for someone to truly open up.
So, how do you actually do that? Well, first, you ask open-ended questions. Instead of, "Did you finish it?" try, "Tell me about how it's going." Second, you have to get comfortable not having an immediate solution. Just listen. Third, go out of your way to find viewpoints that challenge your own. And finally, you practice empathy. You try to really feel what the other person is feeling.
When you start to combine all of these things, the pause that helps you manage yourself and the empathetic questions that help you understand others, you're not just having a better conversation, you're actually building something. Which brings us to our final section, the architecture of connection. And the impact this has on a team is just huge.
Get ready for this statistic from Gallup. It is absolutely staggering. A full 70%, 70, of the variance in how engaged a team feels comes down to just one person, their manager. Your ability as a leader to pause, get curious, and build connection literally shapes the entire experience of your team.
And that engagement isn't just some feel-good metric. It hits the bottom line, hard. We're talking about teams that are way more profitable, more productive in sales, create more loyal customers, and, get this, have nearly 60% less turnover. This isn't just nice to do. It is fantastic for business.
The researcher Brené Brown has this really beautiful way of talking about this. She calls it story stewardship. The idea is that when someone tells you about their experience, their struggle, their idea, they are handing you their story. And being a good steward of that story, honoring it, protecting it, not judging it, that is the absolute bedrock of any real connection.
Building these kinds of connections, it takes real courage. It can feel vulnerable. And as this idea suggests, it is completely impossible if we aren't good stewards of the stories we hear from others. It's maybe the biggest responsibility we have in our relationships with each other. So the next time you find yourself in one of those tough spots and you're about to reach for that old scripted I statement, just pause. And instead of asking yourself, how can I say this just right, maybe ask yourself a different question. What story am I failing to hear right now? Because the answer to that question might just change everything.